they can continue to push against it and warmonger and everything else. It's not going to change the fact that this war is ending. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey everyone, happy Monday. Oh my God. Yeah, what a weekend, Stephanie. And I guess we have to start with Friday afternoon at the White House. And obviously, everyone has heard about the explosive conversation between Zelenskyy, Trump, and JD Vance. So I don't think we need to play that clip because I imagine everyone has heard it. I'm sure you've probably felt the same as I did, Stephanie, but my jaw hit the fucking floor. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think we've ever seen this kind of conversation take place, like broadcast live from the Oval Office. And I was like, okay, here we go, right? But
Go
at the same
time. This was
time,
crazy.
yeah, but at the same time, I was like, I felt so much pride and excitement that we finally have an administration that has a backbone. And I must have watched the videos 5 or 6 times because I was just so impressed and so floored by how awesome I thought Trump and JD Vance handled that situation. And obviously, not everyone felt that way. And the left and much of the world is in a complete meltdown right now.
Well, you know what pissed me off is I start getting text messages from like a couple of my friends that aren't even like liberal or on the left or anything, but they were like, oh, that was so unprofessional of Trump. But the clip they sent me only cuts off the part where Trump is like arguing. And I'm like, go watch the whole video. But that's what a lot of the MSM was doing. They were carefully picking out what piece they want to
Yep.
show people. And I just wanted to add some really important context from Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy. He's the one that was like always giving KJP a hard time.
Love him. Yeah.
But he gave some good insight because he said what JD could see, but what Trump couldn't see, because Trump was right next to Zelenskyy, where JD was like across from him, was that Zelenskyy was repeatedly rolling his eyes and just making all these gestures that were very disrespectful to Trump. And Trump couldn't see it again because he was right next to him. And so I think that is what got JD to really, because he kind of like initiated where he was calling him out on it. But I think what we couldn't really see on the news clips was all the eye rolling and just that typical demeanor of Zelensky. This is nothing new. He's always been an arrogant prick, you know?
That's the thing. That's
Hmm.
the thing. It's not anything new. And like Marco Rubio defended Trump and he was talking about how like Zelensky's actions are what led up to this whole thing. And he said that they had explained very clearly to Zelensky what the plan was with getting Russia to the table for these negotiations and exploring the possibility of peace. And he was saying, like, for the last 10 days, every time they tried to engage with Ukraine, there was complications. And remember, like, the point of this whole meeting was to sign the minerals deal that was supposed to have been signed last week in Ukraine, where like Zelensky couldn't bother to show up for that meeting. And Rubio said this agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington, and there should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create a scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelensky took it in that direction, and it ended up in a predictable outcome as a result, which I agree with.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing as Zelensky was talking. I'm like, this wasn't part of the deal. I mean, he kept making comments like, yeah, there's not going to be peace. And you had Secretary Bessent, which, you know, I still don't know what I think of that guy, but he did go on CBS and explained to Margaret Brennan, that always is trying to spin the narrative. He explained to her how Zelensky was trying to relitigate the mineral deal in front of the world in the Oval Office when he knew that they had a private lunch planned with 16 members of the cabinet right after that, where he could have had that discussion and clarified any details. And so, yeah, he said, like you said, the plan was to sign the deal to show Russia and the world that America and Ukraine were intertwined. But instead, Zelensky starts acting the way he did. And it showed Putin like that's not the case. The US and Ukraine are not on the same page, and Zelensky plans to keep fighting. So it was a stupid move on Zelensky's part because now it looks like we're not on the same page with Ukraine. Like, what an idiot.
Yeah, and of course, the MSM is calling out Trump and basically saying, he lost his temper and this was a total shit show. But I want to point out that there was a time when Biden also had a very public falling out with Zelensky back in June of 2022, and the MSM was saying that he lost his temper because I don't know if you remember this, but he was demanding that Zelensky show more gratitude after he gave him like $1 billion in aid, and then Zelensky whined about it not being enough. And the difference is like Trump is not going to be walked on the way Biden was. And the left, like, yeah, the MSM called this out when it happened, but they barely blinked an eye when Biden said that, right? It was like not
Right.
a big deal. But as usual, if it's coming from Trump, oh my God, the world's coming to an end and it's a major problem.
Yeah, how many times have we talked about Zelensky not being grateful and just demand, not asking, but demanding? And yeah, Trump's not going to put up with that. And I mean, look at where we're at. There are only really three options, which is World War III, which how many times have we said that's what this is going to escalate to, or another 20-year war that just goes on in the region, or peace. That's it. Those are the options. And Trump is the one calling for peace, but then the media tries to make it sound like he's the crazy one. He wants people to stop dying. He wants peace. Why is that crazy? It's propaganda. And if Zelensky's refusing peace, then the US should just step out of it. Let them lay in the bed they made. Zelensky has nothing to negotiate with. He doesn't have the money or the military capability to win. Europe admitted they don't have the money or the military capability to win. So they need the US, which makes it so incredibly stupid for Zelensky and really for all of Europe to get this attitude with Trump and make it seem like he's the bad guy.
Yeah, I want to play this clip clip of what Trump said after this whole debacle on Friday. And let me know if it doesn't come through clearly because there's a lot of noise in the background. But let's see.
We had a meeting today, as you know, with President Zelensky, and I would say it didn't work out exactly great. From his standpoint, I think he very much overplayed his hand. We're looking for peace. We're not looking for somebody that's going to sign up a strong power and then not make peace because they feel emboldened. And that's what I saw happening. I'm looking for peace. We're not looking to go into a 10-year war and play games. We want peace. And it was just my impression that if we do that, if we sign up, he's looking for something that I'm not looking for. He's looking to go on and fight, fight, fight. We're looking to end the death. 2,000 people died this week, soldiers, more than that, but 2,000 approximately people died this week. Young Ukrainians and Russians. And somebody would say, why do you care about Ukraine and Russian soldiers? I care about them, care about everybody. And we're not doing that. Now, if we don't do anything, he's going to have to make peace, but he's dealing with a very weak set of cards. If we sign, he's dealing with a very strong set of cards, and then he doesn't want to make peace. So that's where we are. It's very simple. I'm not looking to get into anything protracted. I want immediate peace. President Putin is going to want to make, and he wants to end it. And you saw what I saw today. This is a man that wants to get us signed up and keep fighting. And we're not doing that. Not for this country.
I love what he had to say there. And
Yeah,
like
this is
this,
why we voted for him.
exactly.
Peace.
Exactly. And here's something else. Like this was reiterated by Rubio again on Sunday. And he said that Trump will re-engage with Ukraine and Ukrainian officials when they're ready to make peace, which is basically what Trump said. And he said, Zelensky has to stop trying to quote Ukraine-splain on every issue. And Rubio told ABC News that Trump's goal is to, wind down what he's calling a bloody stalemate between Ukraine and Russia. And as we've been saying all along, that means working with Putin, not against him, because Russia needs to come to the table, and Trump is the only one who can do this. And like Trump said, what's the alternative? You keep the war going for another 10 years and Europe and the US continue to pour billions of dollars into it? Like, no, it needs to stop. And Stephanie, I got to say, I am pretty impressed with the way Rubio has been stepping up for this administration. And I am just starting to like him more and more.
I am too. And I always kind of thought maybe he's part of the military industrial complex, but no, like he's calling for peace. And I don't know if this clip is from what you're talking about or if this was a separate one on ABC because he's been doing the news circuit. And I freaking love the way he handles the media. So I want to play this clip because he completely takes control and he makes the point when the leftist media is trying to spin the narrative, he doesn't let them get away with it. So listen to how he responds.
Do you know what the United Nations resolution was? I'll tell you if you want to hear what it was. It basically said this has been a horrible war. It's time for it to end. The job of the UN is to bring about peace in the world. I thought that's what the UN was created to do, to stop wars and to prevent them. And that's what the resolution did. Was it antagonistic towards the Russians? No. Back to the point. But it also didn't praise the Russians. All it said is, this is a bad war. It needs to end. And by the way, at the Security Council, which has not been widely reported, the first resolution on Ukraine that has passed the Security Council in 3 years, passed this week because of the leadership of President Trump. And it's a resolution that says, bad war needs to end. Let's bring the two sides together. That's what the resolution is. Again, what is the United Nations for? Isn't it not a forum to promote peace in the world? And shouldn't our president, shouldn't we all be happy that we have a president who's trying to stop wars and prevent them instead of start them? And I just don't get it. I really don't, other than the fact that it's Donald J. Trump. If this was a Democrat that was doing this, everyone would be saying, well, he's on his way to the Nobel Peace Prize. This is absurd. We are trying to end a war. You cannot end a war unless both sides come to the table, starting with the Russians. And that is the point the president has made. And we have to do whatever we can to try to bring them to the table to see if it's even possible. I'm not promising you it's possible. I'm not telling you it's 90% likely. I'm saying it's 0% likely if we don't get them to a negotiating table. And the sooner everyone grows up around here and figures out that this is a bad war that's heading in a bad direction with death and destruction and all kinds of dangers surrounding it that could spiral into a broader conflict, the sooner people grow up and realize that, I think the more progress we're going to be able to make. But the president's crystal clear. He campaigned on it, and he's going to govern on it. And that is, he is going to be a president that tries to achieve peace, and he has been very clear this is a war that would have never happened had Donald Trump been in the White House, and it needs to end, and we're going to do everything we can to end it in an enduring and sustainable and fair way.
I heard that. I'm like, well said. That is way better than I could explain it. And he's right. If this was a Democrat, everyone would be talking about how wonderful they are for trying to bring peace into the world. But no, because it's Trump and everyone has Trump derangement syndrome, they make it sound like he's evil. Even Lindsey Graham, who's been a huge supporter of Zelensky throughout this entire war, he went and said he was appalled and he called for Zelensky's resignation even. So that should tell you something.
Yeah, I agree with you. And like, I got to play this other clip. I know we have so many clips today, but I saw this earlier and it's Stephen Miller. He went on Jesse Waters' show yesterday, and I want to play what he had to say.
I don't think anybody had any idea that Zelensky would be so impertinent, so disrespectful, so insulting to the United States of America. Look, this is one of the great moments in the history of American diplomacy. The way that President Trump and J.D. Vance stood up for American interests on the world stage, the way that President Trump defended Americans after years of being fleeced and abused and taken advantage of and taken for granted, millions of American hearts swelled with overflowing pride today to watch President Trump put Zelensky in his place. The only reason that Zelensky has a country, that Zelensky is in power, is because of the United States. Americans have suffered economically, funding this war now for years. American security has been degraded, our stockpiles depleted, our ability to project power in other regions of the world negatively affected to protect and defend Ukraine. Americans probably don't even know the true extent of just how much military support on multiple levels and fronts America has provided to Ukraine. And then this man shows up in the Oval Office and lectures us, says we have to do more, says we're not as good as Europe, says that we need to provide them a forever war guarantee, fight Russia till the end of time. No American watching that today says they want to send their sons and daughters to die on behalf of Zelensky. And President Trump was clear and firm and principled, saying either you're our partner for peace in ending this war, or we can't work with you. And Zelensky, for the first time since this has begun, finally met a Western leader willing to assert their own interests, the interests of their own country, and not bow down to and venerate this man as a messianic figure. Americans have watched with horror as Zelensky has been treated as a messiah. Our hearts all break for the suffering and loss and death. But you know what will be even worse? World War III. And today, President Trump said, we are not going to let this escalate into World War III. He defended the Oval Office, he defended the White House, and most importantly, he defended the American people. And I was honored and proud to be there to witness this moment in history.
That's exactly how I felt.
Yes, he's really good. I'm loving
Yeah.
his news clips. He doesn't let them get away with it either.
Yeah, and I want to point out something else too that I read in the New York Post last night, actually. There was an article saying that it was actually the Democrats who convinced Zelensky to basically like showboat in front of Trump, because before the meeting happened, Zelensky met with several anti-Trump Democrats who reportedly advised him to reject the terms of the mineral deal. And this was according to Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, who posted on X and said, quote, just finished a meeting with President Zelensky here in Washington. He confirmed that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there are no security agreements for Ukraine, end quote. And so it was about 40 minutes later that Zelensky met with Trump and JD Vance. And when he first arrived at the White House, if you look at the footage, like Trump was very gracious. He went out, he met him at the car, like smiled, shook his hand, escorted him into the Oval Office. So to me, it's very clear that, like, unlike the narrative that MSM has been trying to falsely shove down our throats, Zelensky was not ambushed by Trump and Vance, which is what a lot of the MSM outlets are saying. And Murphy's post basically like indicates that Zelensky had no intention of signing the mineral agreement on Friday to begin with. So to me, this is basically an example of very blatant interference from the left in Trump trying to establish peace, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it proves two things. I think the first is that the Democrats are complete idiots, because if they're saying there's no security agreement, I mean, just look at the deal. The minerals deal would mean that the U.S. has a huge stake in Ukraine. Therefore, it would be in our best interest to protect Ukraine since our assets are literally in their land. Like, what more of a security agreement could you possibly want?
Exactly. And this, okay, there's this guy named Michael McCune. I have no idea who he is, but apparently he's like a wedding DJ from Arizona. And he put out this post. And so Trump reposted it and shared it on Truth Social. And I just want to read what this guy wrote because it's very much in line with what you just said. And he said, now Zelensky will have no choice but to back down and accept Trump's terms. But here's the genius part. Trump is actually protecting Ukraine without dragging the U.S. into war. By negotiating a mineral deal, Trump ensures that Americans will be involved in Ukraine's mining industry. This prevents Russia from launching an invasion because attacking Ukraine would mean endangering American lives, something that would force the United States to respond. Trump played both sides like a master chess player. In the end, Zelensky will have no choice but to concede because without U.S. support, Ukraine cannot win a prolonged war against Russia. And once U.S. companies have mining operations in Ukraine, Putin will be unable to attack without triggering massive international consequences. Don't underestimate Donald Trump. In this game of chess, he's 10 moves ahead of everyone.
God, you know how exciting that would be if Trump like reposted, you're a DJ and he reposts your post. That's what I love about him. He like talks to normal people and he will repost things, whether it's from, a journalist or just a regular person. But the second thing this proves is that the Democrat Party truly is the party of war. I mean, we knew that, but I feel like they're being so blatant about it. The whole world's waking up to that. They're bought and paid for by the military industrial complex. They're the ones profiting from this corrupt spending that's going to Ukraine that you've done such a good job of highlighting over the past few weeks. And I mean, they've tried to stop everything this administration is trying to do. They call Trump a dictator, yet they're supporting Zelensky, who refused to hold elections. They say Trump would be dangerous and would get us into a nuclear war, yet they want to continue this war with a nuclear nation. It's absurd. It needs to end. The people don't support it, and we need to stop the spending now. And remember, we talked about this not that long ago, how Ukraine has received in just 2 years the same amount of funding that Israel has received from the United States over the entire time they've been established. No other nation has come close to receiving this level of funding. I mean, it's beyond ridiculous at this point. And the other thing they keep saying is that Trump's giving Putin what he wants and just playing into his hand. Well, H.R. McMaster, who I guess served as Trump's national security advisor in his first term, he goes on CBS News saying, quote, Putin couldn't be happier. So, of course, they're all parroting that line, right? And so Trump responds by going on Truth Social and posting, quote, H.R. McMaster is a weak and totally ineffective loser, all in caps, which I just think is so funny. I'm like, there's the mean girl again.
You can hear his voice saying it.
I know. It cracks me up. And like, I think he knows, like, we're all just laughing at this point. He's freaking funny. But then he posts, quote, we should spend less time worrying about Putin and more time worrying about migrant rape gangs, drug lords, murderers, and people from mental institutions entering our country so that we don't end up like Europe. I was like,
Yeah.
damn, that was awesome. Good
And
day.
there's so much truth in that. And I'm
Mhm.
seeing it firsthand.
Yep.
But let's talk about Europe because their initial reaction to what happened on Friday, it has the potential to really shift global relations with the United States. And like relations have already been on edge since Trump came into office. And this incident is like lighting a fire under that. So I want to play this clip of world leader reactions.
We want to bring in NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, who, of course, is just back from the front lines in Ukraine. Richard, this quickly became the Oval Office outburst, seen, heard around the world, obviously in horror in the eyes of many European allies, those in Ukraine as well. What is the reaction in European capitals and in Ukraine to what we just witnessed?
Well, I think you had it exactly right. First, it was shock. This event happened pretty late last night. So the European capitals were already into the evening. They didn't really react to it in real time. But now, with the passage of a little bit of time, that shock has become horror. And you've seen almost every European country, big and small, put out some sort of statement saying, we express solidarity with Ukraine. You can never blame the victim. You should blame the aggressor. Germany, in particular, taking a very strong stance. One legislator there saying that he was shocked that the United States could stab an ally in the back. Now the Europeans are trying not just to show Zelensky's support, but they're trying to potentially replace the United States as the key diplomatic player, the key backer of Ukraine. And Keir Starmer in the UK, you said Zelensky just arrived in London. It is because the UK is now trying to organize an emergency summit. And Zelensky did put out a series of messages this morning on social media, thanking President Trump, thanking the United States repeatedly, but insisting that they need security guarantees. They can't just take Vladimir Putin's word for it that he will stop the invasion, that he won't invade Ukraine again. Ukraine said, and President Zelensky has said time and time again, Putin's words aren't to be believed. They're not to be trusted. We need security guarantees. President Trump clearly doesn't want to provide them and had this outburst when Zelensky kept pressing the point and he was called, being disrespectful to the office. Europe is now trying to turn its shock and horror into some sort of action, but it is not likely, Peter, that the Europeans are going to take this burden and be able to shoulder it alone.
Yeah. Yeah. The Europeans are going to talk about it and not take any action because they never have. They rely on the United States to do that for them. But I want to play a clip from Representative Victoria Spartz, who she's originally from Ukraine. So I think that we should hear from what she has to say because she makes some great points about Zelensky and our, European allies. So this is from an interview where she went on ABC News.
Ukraine, becoming a U.S. citizen in 2000, now a sitting House member. Immediately after this exchange, you posted on X saying, and we'll quote it, Zelensky is doing a serious disservice to the Ukrainian people just to appease Europeans. In your opinion, what needs to be done to save this U.S.-Ukrainian relationship?
Well, it's unfortunately that, where you have a president of foreign country that come for help to the American people and the American president and acts like that. And it's really disservice to the Ukrainian people, too. Insulting the American people after how much we've done. And the behavior of Europeans, I'll be honest with you, it became kind of like the teenage child that thinks that he can act and bash and talk bad things about their parent, and we're going to become and bail them out. And American people are getting fed up with these behaviors and thanklessness, which we have a lot of problems to do too. So I think we need to have a real conversation reality check, because there are a lot of things our great allies are not as great of allies, whether it's on trade and some other issues that we're dealing with Europeans. So we need to have a serious conversation. And if they want to go and do the things without America, then they should put the money where the mouth is. And they haven't been. And they haven't been Ukraine helping as much as they should have. They haven't been deterring Russia. So there are a lot of things that they rely on America. To be disrespectful like that, I couldn't believe that. And that's really what's sad to me to see, because it's not as serious. I think President Zelensky thought he's going to have this act, but President Trump doesn't put up with that.
Yep, Trump's not going to put up with it, And how many times have we said, why can't he just put on a tie? He shows up in that stupid outfit to the Oval Office, and it's just disrespectful. And he makes demands instead of asking nicely, or like JD Vance said, have you said thank you once? No, he doesn't. And this administration's not going to put up with it. Zelensky and all of Europe, just like she said, they're acting like bratty, disrespectful teenagers. And it's like the United States is the parent. We're footing the bill for them and keeping them safe and helping them out financially. And they just stand with their hand out while giving a major attitude and acting disrespectful. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And since you brought up how he can't even put on a tie, I have to play the clip from reporter Brian Glenn. I'm sure everyone's heard this, but he calls Zelensky out on not wearing a suit. And I thought Zelensky's response to this was really fucking disrespectful too.
Second question for President Zelensky. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're the highest level in this country's office and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting.
I don't have such. I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe something like yours. Yes, maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper than. Yeah. Thank you.
So he totally makes a joke of it, right? And he calls a suit a costume and says, maybe he'll put one on when the war's over. And it's like, you know what? You're at the fucking Oval Office and you show up in what is essentially the equivalent of a military tracksuit, right? Like you look like a fool. And is he coordinating his wardrobe with Senator Fetterman? Because it's the same kind of thing, only you're in the Oval Office, not even in Congress. And like, is this supposed to be some kind of low-key power move? Because it's not. It looks fucking ridiculous. I love comfortable clothes as much as anybody. Like, I live in yoga pants, but there's a time and place to dress up. And going to the Oval Office is the time and place when you're meeting with the fucking president and vice president of America. And like, it is so disgraceful. And reportedly, Trump even made a comment about it when Zelensky first pulled up at the White House. I can't remember where I read this, but I think it was either the New York Post or the Washington Examiner. But they were saying that when Zelensky pulled up and he got out of the car, Trump greeted him and said, quote, "You're all dressed up today."
It'll be funny to see, if he comes back wearing a tie. I doubt he will, but I think it's very telling that he called it a costume because he used to be an actor. And I think
Yes.
he is an actor. I think he's a puppet for, the military industrial complex, and they tell him to wear this costume and act like a tough guy. And so he does. He's playing a role. And I think
Mhm.
he just kind of said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, I agree. And like as soon as he went back to Europe, Zelensky like went straight to the UK on Saturday morning for this emergency meeting with the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who of course welcomed him with open arms and said, like, this was such an ass kissing. He said, "Let me just say that you're very, very welcome here in Downing Street. And as you heard from the cheers on the street outside, you have the full backing from the United Kingdom. We stand with Ukraine for as long as it may take. I hope you heard some of the cheering on the street. This is the people of the United Kingdom coming out to demonstrate how much they support you, how much they support Ukraine, and our absolute determination to stand with you, our unwavering determination to achieve what we both want to achieve, which is lasting peace, a lasting peace for Ukraine based on sovereignty and security for Ukraine. So important for Ukraine, so important for Europe, and so important to the United Kingdom. So I'm very much looking forward to our discussions here. Thank you for making the time to come." Like, is he a fucking Biden clone? Because I swear we've heard this exact bullshit speech before. We stand with you, whatever it takes, unwavering support, the ass kissing, Stephanie.
They're
It's
reading from a script. It's
yes.
like they're all puppets just being told what to say by the military industrial complex. I'm convinced.
Yes. And speaking of exactly that, like, I don't trust the EU and NATO. And we're always talking about the propaganda messaging where multiple news outlets just repeat the exact same statements and like there's literally no difference. Well, this is exactly what happened this weekend. And Fox News reported it on Sunday that, all these European leaders are, I guess, mostly posting on X these pro-Ukraine messages. And at least 5 different European leaders have posted the exact same message since Friday, including the president of the European Parliament, the president of the European Commission, the European Commissioner for Trade, European Parliament members, and the European Council president. The exact same verbatim message, which says, quote, "Your dignity honors the bravery of the Ukrainian people. Be strong, be brave, be fearless. You are never alone, dear President Zelensky. We will continue working with you for a just and lasting peace," end quote. I'm
Peace.
sorry.
They're not the ones calling for peace. Trump is.
Exactly. Like, that's what just like blows my mind. This is such bullshit about wanting lasting peace. None of them want lasting peace because if they did, they would be working with Trump, who is literally the only world leader who is trying to establish peace in this war.
I mean, it's almost laughable if the stakes weren't so high. And great. Okay. If the UK wants to continue supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes and foot the bill, wonderful. The US is out. We've done enough. We're going to step back. The UK may be our quote unquote allies, but it sure feels like a one-sided relationship. And Jeffrey Sachs, I know you've mentioned him a lot before. He did that interview with Tucker. Well, he went and talked to the EU Parliament. And I just want to play like a small clip of his message to them.
Trump does not want the losing hand. This is why it is more likely than not this war will end, because Trump and President Putin will agree to end the war. If Europe does all its great warmongering, it doesn't matter. The war is ending. So get it out of your system. Please tell your colleagues it's over. And it's over because Trump doesn't want to carry a loser. That's it. It's not some great morality. He doesn't want to carry a loser. This is a loser. The one that will be saved by the negotiations taking place right now is Ukraine. Second is Europe. Your stock market's rising in recent days by the horrible news of negotiations. I know this has been met with the sheer horror in these chambers, but this is the best news that you could get.
I thought it was great because he's like totally calling them out on it, you know?
Yeah. I
Like,
really liked him.
yeah, he's great. And he's absolutely right. Like, they can continue to push against it and warmonger and everything else. It's not
Mhm.
going to change the fact that this war is ending. Their house of cards is falling. There's nothing they can do about it. So the faster they get on board with Trump, the better off Europe's going to be.
Yeah, but they just keep hanging on. And I know we're playing a lot of clips, but I want to play one more clip from Tulsi Gabbard because, she calls out how our European quote unquote allies are basically implementing anti-freedom policies while backing Zelensky under this guise of freedom.
And what's at stake, which is why he's so committed to working to bring about an end to this war, and frankly, why he's proven that as this war has been waged over the last 3 years, he's the only one that has the ability to do that.
So our next guest coming up, Democratic Congressman, now Senator Chris Van Hollen says that he is very worried about what he saw on Friday, what it communicates. He says the people who are celebrating are Russia and Putin, Xi and China, people who don't have America's best interests at heart. And we do have over the weekend a number of reactions out of Russia. You've got Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov saying President Trump's the one using common sense and that we like the way he's acting. You've got the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov saying what the U.S. is doing is changing the game, and it largely coincides with our vision. What do you make of Russia celebrating and saying what the U.S. is doing lines up with their vision?
They're going to say what their position is. What we should pay attention to here in the United States of America is the American people, so many people across the country celebrating the strong leadership that President Trump and Vice President Vance demonstrated in the Oval Office, something we have not seen over the last 4 years of the Biden administration, where we finally have a president who's going to stand up strongly and fiercely and unwaveringly for the cause of peace and freedom for the American people. I know that that is who President Trump has on his heart and on his mind as he is working towards bringing about a negotiated end to this war. I think those who are criticizing his efforts in this way are showing that they are not committed to peace. And in the case of many of those European countries, that they're not committed to the cause and values of freedom. Even though they speak of this, we heard very clearly during Vice President Vance's speech in Munich different examples of how these European partners and longtime allies in many cases are actually implementing policies that undermine democracy, that shows that they don't actually believe in the voices of the people being heard, and implementing anti-freedom policies. We're seeing this in the United Kingdom. We're seeing this in Germany. We saw it with the tossing out of the elections in Romania. So there's something fundamentally deeper here that shows a huge difference in divergence between the values that President Trump and Vice President Vance are fighting for, the values that are enshrined in our Constitution, the interests of the American people in our peace and freedom and national security, versus those of many of these European countries who are coming to Zelensky's side as he walked out of the White House, saying basically that they are going to support him in continuing this war and that they don't stand with us around these fundamental values of freedom.
Well, I think she makes a really good point there, and we talk about this a lot. Like, it's like what Biden was doing, this constant talk about freedom and democracy, when you're doing the exact opposite, like you're doing in your own country, suppressing people, censoring people, not allowing actual freedom, but you're going to sit there and be righteous about fighting for the freedom of Ukraine.
Yeah, and I think that's what JD Vance was calling out at that Munich summit. Like, we don't share the same values anymore. The US is not on board with what Europe's doing. And why are we allies with countries that are doing the exact opposite of what we believe in?
Right. So Sunday was the start of the NATO Summit in London, and it's being hosted by the UK. And again, this was like the emergency pre-meeting before the actual summit, which is in Brussels. But all of Europe is convening this week to double down on their support for Ukraine. They're treating Zelensky like a hero. And, I already talked about Starmer's ass-kissing welcome, but he gave a speech yesterday where he basically said that getting a good outcome for Ukraine is not just a matter of right and wrong, but it's vital to every nation in Europe. And a group of European nations are going to work with Ukraine on a plan to stop the fighting and then discuss that with the US and take it forward together. So he's now planning to be like the go-between between Trump and Zelensky. And he said yesterday that he believes he can get the United States back on track and side with Europe's new planned peace deal with Ukraine. And to me, that's just laughable.
Like Trump said before, they had 3 years to come up with a
Right.
peace deal and do this. They didn't. And now all of a sudden they're going to be the ones to do it. I don't think so.
No. And I swear, I think Zelensky, I mean, he knows he fucked up, right? Because his moves since Friday have been so fucking inconsistent. He leaves the White House and he's, posts these thank you messages to Trump saying he's grateful for support from the US and the American people. And he acknowledged that despite what happened in the meeting, he said, quote, America's help has been vital in helping us survive. And despite the tough dialogue, we remain strategic partners. And then he said he's still interested in signing the mineral rights deal, and it's going to be the first steps towards security guarantees. And then he goes on Fox News and he does an interview where he says he's confident that the relationship with Trump can be salvaged. And then yesterday, he turns around and tells reporters in the UK that nothing positive came out of this meeting with Trump and Vance on Friday, and there's nothing that's adding to the US-Ukraine relationship, and Ukraine's values and freedoms are not for sale. But clearly Zelensky himself is for sale because once again, he told reporters that he would step down as president of Ukraine if they get to join NATO. And he said, quote, I am exchangeable for NATO. I have said that I am exchanging for NATO membership. Then it means I have fulfilled my mission. And then after this emergency meeting in London, French President Macron announces yesterday that he and, Starmer proposed a 1-month truce between Russia and Ukraine. And then Zelensky reportedly said, no, a ceasefire is not enough. And he said it would be a failure for everyone and a peace deal with no guarantees of Russia coming back, and it would be a trap. And it's like he's trying to play the fucking martyr, like, oh, I exchanged myself for NATO membership. But he's playing both sides. He's trying to play Trump, which he can't. He's playing the fucking European Union. Everything he's doing is incredibly shady. I don't trust a fucking thing that comes out of his mouth because he does not stick to any deal that we've tried to make.
And he has no leverage. Who is he to make all these demands? And if Ukraine joins NATO, that's it. That's World War III. That's the option that he's pushing for. This is insane. He has no leverage. Why is anyone even listening to him? He's got nothing.
Yeah, well, let me tell you who is not listening to him, which I'm very happy about this. There are a couple of NATO countries that are siding with Trump and not blindly going along with the EU and, in support of NATO. And one is the president of Hungary and I'm sorry, the prime minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban. He posted on X on Saturday and he said, President Trump is doing exactly what he promised during the campaign. He's doing everything he can to bring about peace. And then he had another post on Friday where he wrote, today, President Trump stood bravely for peace. Even if it was difficult for many to digest, thank you, Mr. President. And then the other country that's with Trump is Slovakia, and the prime minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, he officially declared on Saturday that Slovakia is no longer going to be funding Ukraine. I think I have the post here. No, I don't. I thought I did. I'm wrong. Oh, well. Go look at it. It's on.
At least they're not all, bought and paid for in NATO. Sounds like there's a couple reasonable ones.
Yeah, I wish I had this post. Crap. Oh, well. Even NATO chief Mark Rutte, he told Zelensky that he needs to find a way to restore his relationship with Trump. He posted on X about it on this first day with this NATO summit. And he said there are three key points that need to be addressed. Number one, support Ukraine today. All in Europe will need to give more. Number two, we all want a peace deal and it has to last. Europe is really stepping up here. And number three, to keep NATO strong, Europe will increase defense spending, which is exactly what needs to be done because Europe has relied on America for too long. They need to step up to the plate and they need to take a greater role in NATO.
I mean, I know I'm bringing up the obvious, but Ukraine isn't even a part of NATO. Like, why are we even involved in the first place in a non-NATO country and feeling like we all need to bankrupt ourselves, giving them money? Like the whole thing is just absurd at this point. I'm starting to wonder, like, are we even supporting the right side here? Because I feel like the people we're supporting are just fucking evil at this point, and it's making me question everything.
Yeah. Okay. I found the post that I wanted to read. So sorry, hang on. I need my glasses because it's fucking tiny writing. Okay, so he posted and he said, Slovakia will not support Ukraine either financially or militarily to enable it to continue the war. If others choose to do so, we will respect that. Slovakia has reservations about the unrealistic strategy of peace through strength, which is only intended to serve as a justification for continuing the war in Ukraine. Ukraine will never be strong enough to negotiate from a position of military power. For the conclusion of the EU summit, Slovakia proposes, among other things, the necessity of an immediate ceasefire, regardless of the moment a final peace agreement is reached, which President Zelenskyy and a huge number of EU member states reject. Slovakia demands that the conclusions explicitly include a requirement to reopen the transit of gas through Ukraine to Slovakia and Western Europe. The situation is absurd. Gas from the east to the west is not flowing, yet Ukraine is worsening the situation in Europe by taking European gas. This is Russian gas, for which it pays, thereby funding Russia's military needs. It's impossible to ensure Europe's competitiveness of the supply of Russian gas through Ukraine is not restored. The assistance that the EU and Slovakia provide to Ukraine in various forms cannot be a one-way ticket. If the summit does not respect that there are other options besides simply continuing the war, the European Council may not be able to agree on conclusions regarding Ukraine on Thursday. Slovakia respects the need to increase Europe's defense capabilities. And I think he brings up a very good point there as well, because this war has completely fucked the European economy, which we've talked about many times. And he's basically saying this war is helping to support the Russian economy.
Yeah. And it's shown Europe's hand too. It's made me open my eyes to the fact that they don't have the military capability. They're too busy with, DEI and censorship and open borders that they've completely weakened their country and they have no leverage, just like Ukraine has no leverage. So them acting like they can talk all they want at this NATO summit, it doesn't change the facts that they don't have what it takes to keep the war going.
And that's another interesting thing because on this whole, ceasefire deal that Macron announced, which is not a done deal, and we'll see what happens. I think the summit ends on Thursday. So one of the things he said was that the European Union needs to pony up 200 billion euros, which is like $208 billion. And they need to strengthen their defense capabilities, if the United States decides to not keep supporting Ukraine. And the start of this will likely be an EU investment of 20 billion euros, so $20 billion. And the plan is to do this at the meeting in Brussels on March 6th. So we'll see what happens. But this is money that they should have been bringing to the table years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If they want to bankrupt themselves, great. But the US isn't going to do it anymore.
Yeah. And on this topic, I want to get your take on this because Elon posted on Saturday night basically insinuating that we should leave NATO. And you and I have talked about this before. His comment was in response to an X user who posted something and said, it's time for the US to leave NATO. And Elon responded to it by reposting a message from one of my favorite controversial senators, Thomas Massey. He had called he had called NATO, quote, a Cold War relic that needs to be relegated to take to a talking kiosk at the Smithsonian. And Senator Mike Lee is also very outspoken about the US leaving NATO, but we know most of Congress isn't because it's primarily composed of the military industrial complex. And this is one of those things that can't be accomplished by an executive order, and it would require congressional approval by 2/3 of the Senate. But I think we should leave NATO, Stephanie, don't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the United Nations too, while we're at it. How about that? They're just another corrupt organization, just like all the alphabet agencies here. It's just another way to steal money. There's no benefit to the US. And NATO is the whole reason this war even started. Like Putin warned over and over again for NATO to stop expanding, but they just kept pushing closer to Russia, provoking Putin. And I think everyone should remember that before Putin invaded Ukraine, he told NATO if they would just put it in writing that Ukraine would not join NATO, he would not invade. And of course, they refused to do that. So, NATO did the exact opposite of what they were meant to do because instead of like keeping peace and everything, they're provoking World War III. And so
Yeah.
why are we a part of that? We need to pull out. We should have pulled out in Trump's first term. We don't need to be in there.
No, the whole thing is a power grab, and everything comes down to money, right? And I want to bring up something else that came up this weekend because that's exactly what this is all about. So, there is a Norwegian fuel company that basically tried a version of putting sanctions on the United States. It's a company called Haltback Bunkers. And after this whole debacle in the White House on Friday, they put out a statement saying that they were going to immediately stop being a fuel supplier for American military ships in Norway, or basically any American ships docking in Norwegian ports. So I want to read what they said before it was taken down. It said, quote, "We have today been witness to the biggest shit show ever presented live on TV by the current American president and his vice president. Huge credit to the president of Ukraine for restraining himself and for keeping calm, even though USA put on a backstabbing TV show. It made us sick, short and sweet. As a result, we have decided to immediate stop as fuel provider to American forces in Norway and their ships calling Norwegian ports. No fuel to Americans. We encourage all Norwegians and Europeans to follow our example. Slava Ukraina." End quote. So I will play devil's advocate here and say, on the one hand, I do support private businesses who choose to do business with whomever they want because I support free enterprise. And if you don't want to serve America, then don't serve America. But apparently the Norwegian government was not in agreement with that. And they very quickly intervened. Like the post was deleted within hours, and the Norwegian defense minister issued an official statement that the Norwegian government does not support Hatback Bunker's decision. And the defense minister said, quote, "We have seen reports raising concerns about support for U.S. Navy vessels in Norway. This is not in line with the Norwegian government's policy. I can confirm that all requested support has been provided. The U.S. and Norway maintain a close and strong defense cooperation. American forces will continue to receive the supply and support they require from Norway."
Yeah, they don't want the US ships out of there. They're fucked. If the US Navy pulls out, they're sitting ducks. I mean, how
Yeah.
stupid. And this is just a theme, right? Everyone that tries to talk shit about the US and Trump, they end up taking it back and then kissing Trump's ass, just like Macron did last week, because at the end of the day, they need the US a hell of a lot more than we need them.
Yeah, 100%. And like there was already one of the clips that I played talked about some of the Russian response to what happened in this meeting, but I want to mention something else. It was Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, and she stated on Saturday and said, quote, "The visit of the head of the neo-Nazi regime, V. Zelenskyy, to Washington on February 28 is a complete political and diplomatic failure of the Kiev regime. With his outrageously boorish behavior during his stay in Washington, Zelenskyy confirmed that he is the most dangerous threat to the world community as an irresponsible warmonger."
Yep. That's well said. I mean, he is. And I love how they call him out as a Nazi.
I know. That's what was so funny to me. But okay. I'm sure we'll get more updates on this, especially as the European Union summit and NATO summit progresses. But I have to switch gears here and end this on some comedy, Stephanie,
Thank
about
God.
Gavin Gavin Newsom's latest move in communist California. Are you aware that he just started a podcast?
Oh my God. No, 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 no.
Yeah.
I did not hear this.
It's called This is Gavin Newsom, and I have to play the trailer that was released on Thursday. So listen to this. I don't want to resume. I want to play it from the beginning. Hang on. Okay.
I'm Gavin Newsom, and having real conversations is nothing new for me. Tackling tough questions, engaging with people who don't always agree with me, debating without demeaning. Now I'm taking those conversations even further on my new podcast. Each week, I'm inviting voices from across the political spectrum, including those I fundamentally disagree with, to discuss the most pressing and challenging issues of our time. I support border security. You're trolling folks and trying to find migrants to try to get some news and attention so you can out-Trump Trump. How's that going for you, Ron? You're down 41 points in your own home state. 71% of the GDP in America are blue counties. I would 71% of the GDP in America population studies, progressive policies. But it's not just their voices that matter. It's yours too. And that's why I want you, the listeners, to be part of the conversation. We'll discuss, we'll debate, and we'll decode what the hell is going on.
The price of eggs is so ridiculously expensive. So we agree that this price is insane.
Insane. People are fighting for eggs. What kind of world do we live in that respect? This is bird flu, and they need to take it very, very seriously, the Trump administration.
Kennedy scares me the most. The lunatics in charge of the asylum, I think you alluded a little bit to how you would have to manage up with him.
That first act by the new Health and Human Service the secretary was a little more alarming, but the fact that he already is looking to vandalize that advisory committee, we're going to be very vigilant.
What's really going on with Doge? And why does Elon Musk have so much power?
It's a question we're all asking ourselves. There's a lack of transparency around Doge. There's a lack of understanding about his role. He's got all this power and authority. Is it moral authority or formal authority? Is he actually going in and accessing your data? And my biggest fear, to be candid with you, is public safety.
Do you think that the Democrats have a messaging problem?
The majority of people saying we're quote unquote out of touch, that we don't represent you, that we are weak. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a messaging problem. We may even break some news. So we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of calls about something that's getting a lot of attention, unsurprisingly, and that's what's going on with the Menendez brothers. Today, I just notified the LA DA as well as the Menendez attorney, including victims, that I have directed the Board of Parole hearings to do what we call a risk assessment investigation into their applications specifically for commutation. The question for the board is a rather simple one. Do Eric and Lyle Menendez, do they pose a current, what we call unreasonable risk to public safety? The risk assessment will be conducted as they typically are conducted by experts in public safety as well as forensic psychologists. We're going to make the findings, by the way, available to the judges presiding over the resentencing motion in LA Superior Court, as well, of course, to the district attorney himself. There's no guarantee of outcome here. My office conducts dozens and dozens of these clemency reviews on a consistent basis, but this process simply provides more transparency, which I think is important in this case, as well as provides us more due diligence before I make any determination for clemency. So join the conversation and subscribe now. This is Gavin Newsom.
Okay, Stephanie, that's the trailer for his new podcast.
Sounds like he's setting things up for when he gets fired. What does every politician do when they get fired? They start a fucking podcast.
I have to read you some of the reviews, okay? Because
this will be good.
Yeah. So Such ignorant and such anger and mostly ignorant. My grandkids' school burned down. And if you actually knew the facts and lived through the storm that night, you might understand that the Eaton fire was nearly unstoppable once it began with embers. Oh, wait, never mind. This is a positive one. I don't want to read a positive one. I want to read the negative reviews. I'll just go to the ones I wrote
Hard to
down.
believe
Okay.
there's any positive ones.
I know. Well, yeah. Just ignore that one. So here's one. If 0 stars were an option, absolute trash and waste of oxygen, the nerve to try and put yourself on some pedestal while social is in ash, the economy is in trash, prices are only getting higher for everything. Yet you and your trash administration still continue to baffle the people of this county. How inept, disingenuous, and tone deaf you are. Get out of office. Literally no one in California wants you in the government. Here's another one. This podcast is exactly what you'd expect: an endless defense of high taxes, reckless spending, government overreach, and soft on crime policies that have driven businesses and residents out of California in record numbers. Newsom champions the same disastrous ideas that have led to skyrocketing homelessness, unaffordable housing, failing schools, and an unsustainable cost of living. Instead of taking responsibility, he doubles down on failed progressive policies while ignoring their real-world consequences. If you want a blueprint for how to mismanage an economy, this is the podcast for you. Another one, the biggest fraud California has ever seen is now going to try and deflect and blame others for his failed leadership. The blabbering of a malignant narcissist. Another one, vote this idiot out. I'll listen when Newsom'S explains why he was able to go to the French Laundry and the rest of us had to stay home. Could not make it through the trailer. Only the ego of slick Newsom would do something like this, clearly trying to do whatever he can to be relevant for the 2028 election. And then the last one, I can't believe this slimy grifter really thinks a podcast is a good idea at this time in his miserable career. I would rather jam ice picks into my eardrums than listen to this fraud try to spin the fact that he has, quote, ruined California. Dear Gavin, why don't you just retire and go spend the rest of your pathetic days in your new mansion by the sea, and please never darken our doorstep again.
Oh my God. Well, this will give us some good content. I mean, wow, narcissist, 100%. Like, what do you think we should call the podcast? I think we should call it I Am Gavin Newsom. It's like so ridiculous, this guy, but it'll be funny. I mean, there is that. At least it's good comedy.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of comedy. So at first, you know how I found this too? Because we were driving somewhere on Saturday and I was looking for a podcast, like a haunted podcast I wanted to listen to. And I went to see like what's at the top of the podcast charts. And this trailer was like in the top 10 of the podcast charts this weekend. And I was like,
you want to know why though? Because of people like me and you, like everyone's like, oh my God, this will be hilarious. So they're like listening to troll him. I mean, come on. Doge, there's no transparency. They have a whole website where they show you everything. Elon Musk posts like multiple times a day. Oh, the price of eggs. And then he says right after that, we need to take the bird flu seriously. Yeah, dipshit, you killed millions of chickens all in the name of the bird flu. And now you're complaining about the cost of eggs going up. Like, it's going to be hilarious because he's so fucking stupid. He's just himself already.
And then he's going to do breaking news on the Menendez brothers. Like, come on. And one last thing, like, remember we were talking during the fires about the move to recall Newsom and then also Mayor Bass? Well, interestingly enough, if you type in Newsom on Google, the very first thing that pulls up is Newsom recall.
Oh, perfect.
And several news outlets, including News Nation, reported on Friday that Mel Gibson recently joined in this effort to recall him. And the group is called Rescue California. And I think it's the same group that unsuccessfully tried to recall him back in 2021. But I thought was interesting was one of the spokespeople for the organization said, even if it doesn't work, like, and they can't recall him, Newsom's a better governor when he's under a microscope. And that California cannot stay on this trajectory for another 3 years until his term is up in 2027. So maybe by doing another recall and putting enough pressure on him, then he'll act better. Which, if you think about it, that is such a sad way to get your governor to
Mhm.
try to like.
I can't.
I
Can
mean,
you
I
imagine
guess if it
living there
works.
and knowing you have
No,
3 more years of this shit? Like,
absolutely not.
oof.
Mm-mm.
Maybe he'll tell us all about the smart city that he's building where all the homes were demolished.
Yeah, we're gonna have to tune in to and see when his first episode airs.
Oh, I'm gonna do it just for a good laugh because I mean
Hmm.
we need a good laugh at this point in time, right? That was
Yep.
good. That was a great thing to end on. All right. Well, we hope that everyone has a great week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday. Maybe we'll have a nice, fun clip from Gavin Newsom's new podcast. All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.